Welcome, I'm Don Tinney, a high school English teacher from South Hero, Vermont, who currently serves as your president of Vermont-NEA. I'm happy to be here today with State Senator Tim Ashe, who is running for Lieutenant Governor. And would like to begin today just asking you, Senator Ashe, why are you running for this office?
Well, thanks, Don, and thanks to all the members of the Vermont-NEA. As a son of a career public school teacher, I know what the normal job as a teacher entails, let alone doing it during COVID-19 and having to switch to remote on a dime. The primary reason I'm running for Lieutenant Governor is really the same theme that's motivated all of my runs for State Senate, which is closing the gap in what I call the two Vermonts. And what I mean by that is not just addressing the disparities between communities that have more resources and those that have fewer resources, but also really taking on poverty in a very direct way. I've met with school teachers and staff throughout the state, really talking about this issue of how poverty translates into the schools and how schools have increasingly become the place that is expected to not only teach kids core academic subjects, but also meet their human needs. I also really feel strongly that now is a time that the state needs someone in the Lieutenant Governor's office who both can communicate the importance of public education. I'm sure all the candidates will say they support it, but has actually done something to support Vermont's teaching workforce. And in my case, I have twice put my political career on the line to support public education in Vermont, first blocking the governor's proposed cuts to educators' benefits, and then the second blocking the governor's proposed across the board cuts to schools throughout the state, which would have, of course, disproportionately hit the poorest school districts in the state.
Thank you. And as you're very well aware, and since we're in the middle of this pandemic, I wonder if you could talk a little bit about your views about the reopening of schools.
Well, the challenge of reopening our schools is so complex, and that's one of the reasons why earlier this week I called on the Secretary of Education to create a school reopening task force. In the early days of COVID-19, it was understandable that the administration might have to come up with quick guidelines and then keep working on them as time went by, because there was no time to spend months formulating the perfect policy. But I'm very worried right now that unless a task force is created, we're going to get midway through August. Montpelier is going to put out a set of guidelines which will look good in theory, and then every single school across the state is going to say, well, that sounds good, but how's that actually going to work at my school? And from my point of view, we need that discussion to be inclusive. It can't just be thinking about what the principal and superintendents think, although they're obviously critical as well, but everybody from guidance counselors to nurses to bus drivers to teachers, and frankly, parents. I don't think people understand how important predictability is. In order to reopen our economy, parents need to know whether the schools are going to be open, and if it's going to be open 3 days a week, 5 days a week, whatever it is. Uncertainty doesn't just hurt our education system, but also our economy. So my hope is that the Secretary of Education will take me up and also heed the call of the Vermont-NEA, get those discussions started right now so we don't find ourselves in August with a tremendous amount of regret.
Thank you. How will you, as Lieutenant Governor, address the systemic racism and inequity in all of Vermont's institutions?
Well, no small challenge, as we know. The education community has probably been at the forefront of trying to root out systemic racism and injustice in the curriculum. The ethnic studies legislation that we've passed is a good example where educators were in the lead, trying to revisit the structural resources to make sure that we're rooting out inequities and disparities. I'll just say from my point of view, over the years, I've helped write legislation in almost every aspect of state society to try to root out injustice. But I have to confess that almost every time we have passed a law, we all celebrate it and say this is a good sign of progress. The officials who are in charge of making sure that we actually do those things almost always find a way to slow things down, stop them, ignore them. And that's why this year, in light of everything that's going on around us, I told the Senate, enough is enough. We are going to act now. And act we did. We passed the most comprehensive criminal justice reform legislation in more than 15 years. We passed juvenile justice legislation, which directly impacts the schools, I think, in positive ways. And then in terms of law enforcement issues, we made some what seemed straightforward, but actually were difficult to get done, strides in terms of requiring mental health professionals to be embedded at our state police barracks, banning chokeholds when people are in police custody in ways that would prevent them from breathing, requiring the use of body cameras by state police. And then moving forward as Lieutenant Governor, my feeling is, after having just described that the officials responsible for carrying out the work usually find a way to slow it down or ignore it, I'm ready to be the watchdog to make sure things get done. I'll be wrapping up my legislative career in a few months, one way or the other. And I'm happy to turn my attention to making sure that this very important work is achieved and doesn't go to the back burner if people start moving on to other crises of the day.
Great, thank you. And just any final thoughts you have before we close out this session?
Well, first off, I'd just say how amazed I am. I mean, I guess maybe not even amazed, how impressed I am that our school staff and teachers were able to make such a positive out of the horrendous circumstances that were presented to them these last 3 months. The fact that education was able to continue, albeit in different ways, is a huge testament to the flexibility and talent of our state teaching and staff workforce. I look ahead to the next few months. Things are going to be difficult. The hole in our state's education fund is significant. And my belief is that now is a time to have a lieutenant governor who has proven an ability to block deep cuts both to teachers and to the public education system. As I say, all the candidates, I'm sure, are in favor of our public education system. But right now, I think more than ever, we need someone who knows how to protect our public education system. And regardless of who the governor is, it's important that the lieutenant governor is able to project a strong vision in support of public education from pre-K all the way through the state college system. And I believe I'm the candidate who has demonstrated the ability to do that. And I look forward to working with the Vermont-NEA in that role.
Well, thank you very much, Senator Ashe. Thank you very much, Senator Ashe, for being here. And on behalf of my fellow 13,000 members, thank you for sharing your thoughts with us. And we'll see you on the campaign trail.
All right. Thanks, Don.